You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We live F1. Welcome to Missed Apex Podcast. It's a midweek catch-up as we look forward to the Mexican Grand Prix, and we're going to take our patron feedback and find out what they reckon. So, we are an independent podcast produced in the podcasting shed with the kind permission of our better halves. We aim to bring you a race review before your Monday morning commute. We might be wrong, but we're first, and yes, of course, it would be enough to just have Spanners sitting here doing a show that proved it. The US Grand Prix Sprint review was our most downloaded show of all time. No, it wasn't, but some people said they didn't mind that I did a quick review. But to analyze what you all reckon and look forward to the Mexican Grand Prix, I thought I'd bring along a friend. It's the panelist from a wrestling podcast, Alex Geensy Van Gene. Hello, Alex.
Hello, Spanners. I'm looking forward to this one. This is nice, just me and you and what our listeners reckon. And I've read a few of them. I've looked at a few of them. I'm very keen to hear some of the voice notes you've got to play, and we can break some of them down. I'm looking forward to it.
I did say that there was a rule that we should not cover the penalty. So none of the voice notes.
What penalty?
Thank you for saying that. But it's taken up an awful lot of my time. And I think it's clear that everyone is passionate about it. It's definitely stirred up a lot of emotions, but I think it has kind of been covered to death. So I did say to people, no questions specifically about the lap 52 penalty. And I won't be giving my opinion about whether it was just an insane smear on the season. Like I won't give my, you can't do it. You can't drag it out of me, Alex.
Oh, I won't try to tell you that the stewards are a farce and the rules are a farce, because I wouldn't do that on a show where we're not talking about the penalty that happened.
So I'm going to try and pick a question straight off that does not do that, that does not address that. So why don't we go straight into our Discord voice notes? So these are voice notes from people in our patron Discord. I've never done this before, so thank you to our volunteers. But if you want to be involved and you want to join a nice F1 community that actually has very little toxicity in it. In fact, I think I'm probably the most, like, I'm the one who gets modded the most. My own mods will either time out me or send me messages saying that contravenes your own rules. But apart from me, it's a very nice forum. Patreon.com/Missed Apex. So let's play a voice note from Rolando.
Hey, Spanners, this is Rolando, following up on your I reckon request. So I reckon that Colapinto is going to take Albon's spot in 2025. And it's not because I don't like Albon, I quite like him, but he seems to be struggling a little bit under pressure. So I feel like the Williams has learned their lesson, and they might be looking to replace drivers sooner than later. And then I also reckon that Hamilton's going to win a championship for Ferrari in the next 3 years. And lastly, I would like to say, last time I was on the show, I said Haas was aiming for position 7, P7 for the championship. And look, here we are, position 6. So I reckon I was right. All right, take it easy.
Thank you so much there, Rolando. I think we'll park the Hamilton one for a second, but there's two great points there. So Colapinto and Haas. So we've got a couple of other non-voice note messages about Colapinto. Metiv says, I reckon that Liam Lawson has and Komatsu have demonstrated that Daniel Ricciardo and Gunther Steiner received far too much benefit of the doubt and far too many chances. We've had Paolo say, I reckon Colapinto for VCARB in 2025, as hinted by Uncle Joe Saywood. And Paolo says, I think that would be fantastic. And on the Haas note, we've got Pat that says, I reckon it's time for people to start respecting Haas and start kicking Alpine as the team which adds nothing to the sport. You're not going to get a great deal of argument from me on the Alpine thing. So where should we start, Alex? Colapinto, there have been rumours. In fact, you highlighted to me an article that was maybe explaining why Colapinto might be about to enter the Red Bull stable.
Yeah, so first of all, I reckon this too. Someone in our group shot me down because Albon has a contract and has paid for it. But the thing I saw today, which actually was on the Missed Apex Facebook group, stated that apparently Colapinto is in a way backed by Carlos Slim.
Ooh.
Now, if you don't know, Carlos Slim, one of the richest men in the world, worth $88 billion, also has been the biggest backer of Sergio Perez. And the rumor has it, he's a bit fed up with Perez. I mean, I can't imagine why.
You shut up, sir.
He's been racing so terribly. I completely understand why. And there is a conversation that he might stop backing Perez and back Colapinto. Apparently, there is a large sum of money that he is paying to Red Bull and in some part Christian Horner. Again, this is rumor. In some parts of Christian Horner as well, which if that goes away and goes towards Colapinto, then, you know, we could see not only Colapinto in a V-Carb, we could see Colapinto in a Red Bull.
Ooh, can I just firstly, because there's a lot of Perez slander, can I say that this proves that in my definition of a pay driver, Sergio Perez isn't a pay driver? Because my definition of you hate this. My definition of a pay driver. Do you know what? A lot of the other guests don't openly laugh while I'm making my point. So where's Kyle? Let's bring Kyle back. I think the definition of a pay driver, my definition of a pay driver is if that money was always going to be that for that one person, like Lance Stroll's money, or was their money looking for a certain type of driver? So, like, for example, Marcus Ericsson, to me, doesn't fit the pay driver mold. Same as Kevin Magnussen doesn't fit the pay driver mold. They are supported in a way, in the same way Perez is, because Marcus Ericsson's backers wanted a Swedish driver. Magnussen's backers wanted a Danish driver. Carlos Slim wanted a Mexican driver, South American driver. And the proof of this, Alex Van Gien, is that now, because Perez is no longer the commodity that Carlos Slim wants, he's looking at moving that money. That is money looking for a driver, and it's gone to Colapinto. This proves Perez was not a paid driver.
If you could all see Spanners as clearly as I can,
I'm getting redder.
You would know he isn't believing everything he is currently saying.
I believe it.
And I just believe the thing that's always irked me about Perez, and I don't know how we've gotten to Perez about Colapinto, but anyway, the thing that's always irked me about Perez is he's not won anything on the way to Formula One, championship wise, because Slim has just gone, oh, okay, time for the next formula, here's more money. Time for the next formula, here's more money. And that is the definition of a pay driver. He wasn't given that role because he's excellent, like some of the other drivers, like Lewis Hamilton and people like that, who've had money thrust upon them because they're so good. He has just been pushed into a relationship because there was apparently a family relationship between the Slims and the Perezes.
So by your definition, everyone's a paid driver because they found money. Everyone has to go and find money.
There's a difference between sponsorship and just paying to get someone through. When you sponsor someone because there is a benefit to your business and to pushing them forward.
But that line is getting blurred. So there are drivers who have been in F1 this year who on paper collect a salary and have a sponsor, a personal sponsor, but they just hide the links.
Lance Stroll gets a salary.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, Lance Stroll gets paid. So there you go.
I don't think he needs one. I think his trust fund probably looks after him.
Okay, we should probably actually address Rolando's
Colapinto
points. So what was the first one? No, so actually the first one about Colapinto is he should replace Albon. So Colapinto has a long-term contract, apparently, with Williams, and it's just a case of whether Carlos Slim would front up and pay that off. So forget about Red Bull for a second. Long-term, has Colapinto kind of already, or by the end of the season, proved that maybe you should replace Albon with Colapinto? It's not going to happen for next season, but you get to the end of 2025, let's say Carlos Sainz has put manners on Albon, which I think is relatively likely. I would bet, if I could bet.
He's pretty close to Charles Leclerc.
He's pretty close to
regard incredibly highly.
And he can have a weekend. I think Carlos Sainz goes missing some weekends. The weekends where he doesn't go missing, he looks pretty good. In the sprint race at Austin,
he was phenomenal.
Yeah, he looked really good. He looked like on a charge. And you go, oh my, wow, where does this come from? But where is it? Where is it week in, week out?
That's what separates the very best from the very good, and that's what Max is capable of doing. That's what Lewis is capable of doing. I mean, to be fair, Charles Leclerc goes missing on enough occasions. I think the only two drivers actually this season, the only driver that hasn't gone missing is Max. I think Max has performed in every single race where nobody else has. I think other people have gone missing. So it really just shows how good you've got to be the best.
Okay, I haven't formed this thought, but I think there's a difference between the flaws with Leclerc. So I think Leclerc always has that core pace and talent, but sometimes doesn't string the weekend together, has a bad time, gets out of sync. I think he pushes far too hard in practice. And I would like to see out the top drivers who's had the most FP3 incidents, for example, and then put the team on the back foot for qualifying. So I think it's a different kind of flaw, whereas Carlos Sainz, maybe there's certain tracks and conditions that suit him, and when he's in his window, he looks really great. I don't think that's the case with Leclerc. I think Leclerc is always fast, always strong, but doesn't always deliver. Am I making that distinction well enough? But I think out of those two drivers, you'd always pick Leclerc over Sainz.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assertion to make against the two of them. But it baffles me with Leclerc because I see brilliance in him, but he often messes it up. And again, yeah, as you say, he can mess it up in an FP3, which ruins the rest of his flow for the rest of the weekend. And it's a shame to see.
Yeah. But right now, gun to your head, you've got an F1 team, you've got a choice between Leclerc and Sainz. I think nearly everyone says, okay, well, I'll have Leclerc. We love Sainz, but we'd have Leclerc.
Depends. Who's my number one driver?
Oh, that's a good point.
Who is if I have to pick Leclerc or Sainz, who's my other driver? Because if my other driver is a Lewis Hamilton or a Max Verstappen, maybe I want a Carlos Sainz.
Can I just say though, before I know this is a Colapinto question and we're meant to be talking about Albon. Good luck, other questions, because I think we're just on this now. Both of those drivers are fantastic. Both of them are team players. So if you're talking about who do you want in your team, both of those are good personalities that you want in your team. And I think both of those, if it was a title push from Ferrari this year and one of them got ahead of the other, both of those drivers would support the other driver. And I've actually got a sneaking suspicion, and Hamilton fans won't like this, I've got a sneaking suspicion that if Leclerc gets a run at the beginning of the season, I think Hamilton will back him up. I think so. You
do? Oh, I thought you were going to go... No, I think if Lewis has a sniff, mathematically, there's nothing stopping.
No, really?
He's got the equipment. Okay, I don't think there's anything stopping him.
We're 8 races in. Hamilton's had 2 DNFs. And the first 3 races, he was getting used to a new power unit and a new crew. And look, by race 8, it looks like they're on even pace. But Leclerc is massively ahead in the championship with Piastri hunting him down. I think Lewis, and this does address Rolando's second point about him winning a championship in the next 3 years. I genuinely believe at this stage in his career, at that point, he'd turn around and go, yeah, I'll just do what I can to help. And I don't think he'd be difficult about it. I think if it was 1-2, he'd just go, yep, come on through.
Past halfway, I'd give it to you.
Past halfway.
Halfway,
that's
I would
good.
give it to you. Past summer break, I would give it to you. But in the first half of the season, there's not a chance in hell you're stopping Lewis from trying to win races.
I think that's still valid. So when drivers move engine manufacturer, there seems to be in the modern era, that is a significant hurdle to overcome. So whenever we've seen drivers move over, 6 months has been kind of the agreed period in Missed Apex where we've said, give a driver 6 months to bed in. And I think that will even count to statistically the greatest driver of all time. So, I would judge Hamilton versus Leclerc on their pace in the second half of the season, just as default, as we've done for every driver moving. So, yeah, I think you're right. We could get to the point where post-summer break, Leclerc's on for a championship push. I don't think Hamilton's going to be a turnip about it. I think he'll just be like, yeah, no worries. It's fine.
He's smart enough, isn't he? He's been there and he's done it and he knows what he needs, especially because if all of a sudden in the second half of the season he's quick, he can be like, oh, well, this could be me next season in the other position. So if I help him now, he'll help me next time. And Leclerc has been very glowing about Lewis Hamilton. I mean, has to, I guess. Or he could say less. Doesn't have to say things, but he has been saying things about Lewis. And I think, did I imagine he said he wanted to learn from Lewis?
Yeah, no, I know. You shouldn't have said that.
That
was a bit of a
I swear you said it.
No, he did say it. I told you he said it, but he did say it. He was like, oh, it'd be good to learn from someone like that. And you go, dude, you're like 17 years into your championship. Don't say it out loud. Like, you might think it. Don't say it out loud.
It's always that kind of thing if you want to go sit under the learning tree of somebody like that, but you do it quietly.
But I think the reason he said that is because Ferrari haven't been in a championship contention really since he's been in there. So he's kind of used to this situation where, oh yeah, it's me and Carlos, we can get on because there's no title on the line. I think a title on the line changes that, massively, and that will be tested. But Lewis Hamilton is 40 next year. Things change when you're 40. I don't think you should have 40-year-olds in Formula One, because 40-year-olds are just like, whatever. I haven't had a nap today, Like Lewis Hamilton, if you see him out at 10 o'clock at night as a 40-year-old, that's because he's had a nap midday. If he's on a fashion catwalk at 10 p.m.
I take offense to this. I was 40 this year, and I spent my 40th birthday being thrown out of a go-kart, and I'm fine. I have bad sciatica, but I'm fine.
I saw you being thrown out of that go-kart. I was meant to be in that go-kart, and I was happy that... Give it another 4 years, Alex, and you'll look at that go-kart and go... Maybe not. I don't quite fancy being thrown out of it.
Listen, I drive my little GX 200, 400, four-stroke engine go-kart that has 9 horsepower, and I have lots and lots of fun. I look at some of the other karts that race with us that are much, much faster, and I'm like, nah, I'm all right. There's karts out there with 35 horsepower, and I'm like, I'm good. I'm all right. On my own round a track, maybe I'll have a play in one. Zero interested. I've got in the air once and sent someone in the air once already in my small card. I have no interest. And
like, you can look back at your 20s and your attitude to racing then. I had a very different kind of lifestyle in my 20s, and I look at the risks we took there, and I go, "Wow, my goodness, what was 25-year-old me doing, risking what we have now with all that stupid stuff?" Like, now I'm emotionally invested in my life, and I'm not ready for it to end in what I thought was going to be the manner in which your life was going to end. Oh my goodness, you were tumbling out of that car, a wheel fell off, you smashed into a wall. The first thing I did was look across at your wife, who didn't look happy.
Who didn't see.
She didn't
see
it.
You were the only person that saw it.
I'm so glad I got it on video. I think we need to post that video.
Yes, it's on my channel. It will be up there as my most watched video.
Anyway, so I think that attitude from Hamilton will be different. I don't think it will be quite as ruthless. And I think if it's the other way around, if Hamilton gets a run, I think Leclerc will support him as well. So I'm really happy with the atmosphere that Hamilton is going into with Fred Vasseur there, with that new Ferrari. And if it does turn out that Hamilton is supporting Leclerc for a championship push, I, as a Hamilton fan for his entire career, I'm actually not going to be unhappy. If he goes about it in a good way, if he actually helps and does wingman in the best wingman way possible while being fast, I'm not actually going to object. I'm going to be happy.
If he comes out of that season as the best wingman that F1's ever had, I actually wouldn't be surprised.
But also I'm confident because Leclerc would do the same. So now we're talking about Sainz at Albon, replace it, up against Albon. I think Albon, in a way, is completely unproven. So he's been able to stay in F1 for quite a long time. He had the trajectory up. Everyone was really rooting for him. The Red Bull stuff did not go well for him. And I actually don't think that he sort of, from a, can I make you a fan of me? I don't think he did particularly well in that regard either. So I was not enamored to Albon in his Red Bull days. It was a failure, but it was a failure in the same way that Gasly was a failure, in the same way that Ricciardo had to leave, in the same way that Perez has been made to look very ordinary, even though he's not, and he's brilliant, and shut up, Alex. But then he went to Williams, and his career there, we cannot tell anything about it. Everyone was saying, like, oh, he's doing so well. He's driving the socks off that car. And then Colapinto comes in with no F1 experience. And is it harsh to say that the way Colapinto is driven has kind of really shone a light on Albon has not been challenged the whole time.
Not only no F1 experience, no one had heard of the guy.
I had never heard.
Unless you religiously watch F2, you'd know. Lewis Hamilton hadn't heard of him, had to be reminded of his name in an interview after Colapinto had come up to him.
I'd never heard that name. Not one time had I heard the name Colapinto. In fact, I had to learn. Colapinto. Got it. Okay, had to put it together.
And it's actually one of the few difficult names I can actually spell because it's got cola in it. Anyway, I think Alex has lived off of. He was part of the George Russell, Lando Norris group of brilliant drivers that came through to F1, and people have been like, oh well, if he was good enough to beat Lando and George, he must be really, really good. But we have a long history of people who've been really, really good in other formulas, the best in other formulas, come into Formula One. It's an entirely different world, and they just haven't got it. I'm not saying Alex hasn't got it, but he's just not that top level driver I thought he was going to be.
Justin wants to yell at you in our chat. So Justin in our Patreon live chat says, Albon and Gasly were in their first or second seasons, so it's unfair to compare them to Max. I agree. So I'm not disagreeing with that. All I'm saying is, where is the evidence that Albon is great? Where is the evidence that Albon is... Where's the CV where you would say, okay, Ferrari has a seat up for grabs, we're pushing for Albon? I don't think anybody outside of Williams is pushing for Albon.
He is going to be a journey. If he survives, he's going to be a journeyman racer. And it's a shame. I like Albon. I do think he races well, and I think he's a nice enough guy, but he hasn't shown as much as I thought he would. I expected him to pace Lawson, and he should be pasting Colapinto, and he just isn't.
So also, there's controversy with this, but from what I've read and from who I've spoken to, I think that Albon pays for that Williams seat. I think Williams benefits to the tune of like double-digit millions having Albon in that seat. So that would fit my definition of a paid driver because it's family money, specifically paying for a seat for that one person. You can argue with me, and if you do, that's fair because I don't have any evidence. I don't.
I'm not arguing the Albon thing because I don't know.
Yeah.
And it would just be me shouting at clouds. I don't like this whole thing. I feel like we should know whether people are paying for their seats or not.
We used to. We knew Pedro Diniz was the heir to
That's Brazilian... because they were properly rubbish. The thing is we don't have any, even Lance Stroll. We don't have any properly rubbish drivers. What was the name? Unfortunately, you're the wrong person for me to ask on this because your history is almost as bad as mine. There was one particular guy who was in F1. He was in it for a few years, and he was just horrendous. Murray Walker used to slam him all the time. Someone in the chat will tell us in a second. And it's just a case of we don't have anyone like that anymore.
No,
who just doesn't belong.
Yeah. The pay drivers are all very fast and all really good at driving. And if you put Lance Stroll on the 80s grid, he's going to do well. And people hate that. But if you put Stroll in the 70s grid, like his core racing skills are good. So I always say, I'm not saying I'm not winding people up when I say this, but Stroll is probably better than Ayrton Senna. Like, put them in go-karts and Stroll is probably better.
I mean, I didn't think you were going to say Ayrton Senna. I thought you were going to say Jim Clark or Fangio.
Fangio, I'll take
Fangio.
But
no one's better than Jim Clark. Jim Clark is the greatest.
Oh, yes, I've read the internet, Alex. In a full well.
The Senna thing, I'm not certain about. But my whole ethos has been with regards to sports people in general. And there was a reckon in this chat somewhere where somebody said the grid in 2030 or something will be better than the grid we've got now. And I agree with that because sports people get better.
I think I found it. I thought I'd found it. Sorry, you carry on. I thought I'd found it.
So yeah,
I have. Stop again. It was in fact Justin. It was an I reckon from Justin, whose last comment I just read out there, which I don't like because it makes it look like there's no one in our patron chat except Justin. It's really busy. Come and join us.
I mean, it is 9:00 on a Wednesday night.
No, the chat room's really. It is actually genuinely. There's loads of people in there.
Paddy thinks Jim Clark was great.
Oh, shush, Paddy. Shush, you're not helping our point. Justin says, I reckon that in 5 years we'll rate the 2029 crop of drivers as much better than the 2024 crop. And that is really interesting because you go, right, where are driver standards at? If I have the assertion that driver standards are generally getting better, it's hard to argue with that. So 2029 and 2024 are quite close. So there's a lot of random elements. But I think if you say the 2029 crop is going to be better than the 2012 crop, I think it would be hard to argue otherwise. Even the pay drivers, they all have to be good.
Yeah, because especially it's like Lewis got knocked out of qualifying by being half a second off. Half a second was normally enough to keep you in the top 10. But the fact that we've got 20 drivers separated by 6-7 tenths of a second, that has never happened in the history of the sport. And I just genuinely believe with diet and training and data and all the technology we've got these days, people will just get better and people will come into the sport more prepared. You know, it's not like in the 90s where they had all the actual on-track testing that they used to get. They don't get that anymore, but they have even more hours in the sim, pouring over data which tells them every single minute detail, and then it's just a few tweaks to get that right to then put it on the circuit. So I don't think it's wild to speculate that year on year we will have better drivers. We haven't had a safety car in 9 races until some 40-year-old spun off on the 4th lap.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. That's horrible. Okay, yes.
You know, and
he's 39 until next year, please.
I know. I'm allowed to take the mick out of Lewis. I splurge about him enough to not have to take the mick once or twice. But it's that case of to not have a safety car through some sort of chaos. Okay, there would have been one for Perez and Sainz at Baku if it wasn't on the last lap. But that shows an element of people being better, and we don't see people often spinning off by themselves and just crashing into a wall for no reason at all. So there's just so much more to say that the crop is getting better and better.
And to back up that point from who was it? It was Justin. So we now are in an era where Sargent could not survive. Like, he couldn't just keep going. So Stroll has had to become competent, if not ultimately fast. But Mazepin couldn't make it because of the repair bill, and De Vries couldn't make it, and a part of that will have been sticking it in the wall too many times. And also, who do we have? Schumacher, with all the best will in the world and the whole kind of, we want another Schumacher in. He couldn't make it again because he kept binning it and putting it in a wall. And you go, yeah, we are in a world where even if you have money and you're backed, you're going to get thinned out if you are a liability. So we don't have a Latifi on the grid right now. We don't have a Sargent. We don't have a Mazepin. So perhaps we are. Why are you smirking? Who did I leave out?
No, just the two lowest drivers we have are Perez and Stroll, in my opinion.
Really?
But the difference is Stroll seems to have stopped crashing.
Yeah,
and has sorted himself out. But he's had enough time. Perez has only been shown up really since he obviously got to Red Bull, and he's up against probably one of the greatest generational talents.
Why are we doing this
the
again?
world's ever seen. But he did do fine throughout the rest of his career. So it's
fine. Statistically, the most wins from the midfield, the most podiums from the midfield. Fine, that's fine for you, is it?
So you've made me lose my train of thought as I'm laughing at you.
Good. I'm glad. And I miss Kyle, and I miss Matt, and I miss Brad. Where are all the good people?
You asked me. I was chilling out yesterday, and you said, "Do you want to come on?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure."
Why must you expose my shame? But yes. So look, let's focus down on Williams. When it's not an attack on Albon, and you're right, he got his chance very soon. I just think this Colapinto challenge. And then the Sainz challenge is going to be massive. Now, if he goes and rinses Sainz over the course of a season, all right, shut up. Good. Well done. That's what you need to do. But I think the smart money is Carlos Sainz will outscore Albon. And then when you get to the end of the season, let's say Colapinto hasn't been bought out by Carlos Slim, and hasn't been signed by Sauber Audi, which I think is still a possibility, and he's been sitting on the sidelines, you might really, if you're James Vowles, go 2026, Colapinto or Albon. And I think it would be smart to go with Colapinto in that scenario.
I mean, you talk about Carlos Slim being involved. If Colapinto continues to rinse Albon for the rest of this season, what stops him going, I'll buy out Alex's contract?
I don't know.
Collar in for next year.
And that's the difference between, do you have a contract because you're a customer, and do you have a contract because you're being employed to drive? And again, I have no proof, but when I've dug around and when I've spoken to people, I think that Williams benefit financially from having Albon there. I'm not married to this. If you object to that and you think you know different, happy to tell me. Email me, Alex Van Gien. No,
I think it's fair to say, until Sainz turns up, Williams haven't had a non-pay driver in years.
I think so. I think that's the case. Yeah.
So I don't think it's a stretch. We don't have the proof. But the thing is when it comes to contracts in Formula One, they're not worth the paper they're written on. If somebody lobs enough money, and I don't know, let's say Albon's contract is 20 million, that's like back pocket money for Carlos Slim to go, okay, off you go, and here's 60 million to put Collar in for the year.
All right, on to question number 2. Comment number 2. No, we've read out a lot of the things I reckon stuff. And so we're actually going to go to Patrick, who has left us a voice note here. So let's listen in.
From the beautiful streets of Barcelona, I still reckon that Red Bull won't win the main race event up until the end of the season. They will be there or thereabouts, but I don't think they will stand on the top spot on the podium this year.
Interesting. Thank you, Patrick. So Patrick is a Pole in the UK, but he was in Barcelona. He says that Red Bull will basically not win another race this season. What do you think, Alex?
I can definitely see that coming. I mean, the thing that Max proved at the weekend is they don't really have the tyre life, do they? They don't have the full race pace that the Ferrari seem to have and the McLaren seem to have. McLaren, I think, messed something up last weekend. I think they, because of the sprint weekend, didn't hook their setup up, didn't get it quite right, couldn't optimize the car,
couldn't open the gap between the two rear wings.
The rear wings, and I think that was more of a mistake on McLaren's end than anything else. But yeah, I can see it. I can see Ferrari and McLaren doing it. I don't think Merc are going to do anything. I think the whole idea that Merc were going to get between Red Bull and McLaren, I just don't see it happening.
You've made a few good points there. So with Mercedes, I just think Mercedes can't string it together. It looks like there's something there in the package, and then they just make insane decisions. And like, why was it an advantage for Russell to be on the old upgrade package? That sums up the whole of the post-2021 Mercedes era. The fact that Russell crashed and that improved his weekend because
it really did. It was like, and Lewis. This was George's quote. Lewis kindly offered me his parts. He said no.
No. We called that on the race review where we were like, no, that was not kindly offered. Hamilton wanted rid of those parts. And even Russell was just like, oh.
But this is what I said, though. It's like, just because you have an upgrade, we said this about Williams.
Update, not upgrade.
Exactly. Because you have an update doesn't mean the update works. And Mercedes have proved me true on that.
Oh, my goodness.
So I assume we will go back to whatever car they had before USA.
No, but Russell was defending Hamilton by basically saying, see how he spun on the new upgrade package. That's why I spun in Q3. And it was the same spot. So that is believable.
Same spot, same spin, same. It was an absolute carbon copy, which is why, I obviously... It's one of those corners, and okay, sim racing, blah, blah, blah. But I've done that corner a billion times in the sim. And the point that both of those cars lost traction isn't where you lose traction in that corner. You lose traction in that corner way later than where they both lost it. They've both gone to turn into the corner because it's probably just a bit of a lift and a bit of a dab of the brake in those cars. and it's just gone.
No. Well, I think, okay, because look, Alex, our iRacing experience is definitely valid. So my
Just ask
F3
Jensen Button.
iRacing experience is the same. And that corner, it's the penultimate corner, the left-hander. It's all about there. You're not hitting the brakes hard. Put it that way. You're using the brakes to steer. You're using the brakes to put the weight onto the outside tyres. That is not a scenario where you should be losing it. If you mess that corner up, you go wide. Yeah, you break track limits. That's how you mess that corner up. So to see both Mercedes drivers go around is weird.
I'm only smiling because me and Brad have definitely rubbed off on you because you're doing all the things with your hands.
Well, Brad.
Me and Brad have definitely rubbed off on you.
No,
but no, you're absolutely right.
Okay, so I'll take a slight diversion to kind of go, this is why. Look, I don't know anything. I'm like nothing. I remember karting with these guys, and I used to be the kind of guy that would win on a stag do or a work do, and I'd go and beat everyone up. And then I started racing with Kyle and Alex and Brad, and there was one moment that it was damp at Milton Keynes, so Daytona, Milton Keynes, and it was like you were in different cars. It's like it was wet for me, but it wasn't wet for you. And you guys were just dancing around me. And even in the dry, you go, what is going on here? So, yes. And then we went into sim racing and, of course, and using Brad's rig and the Brad Fluence. Brad's cost us a lot of money. But yeah,
I go go-karting. I have my own go-kart because of Brad.
You own a go-kart because of Brad. You sit there building
I don't know how that happened.
Oh, my God. I think, like, if Brad was to tragically die, we would all save money. And that's a bad thing to say about your friend, but it's true. But
true.
But doing the karting and having the wheel in your hands. So in a go-kart, you feel the weight in your hands. And in a sim, if you have a good wheel like mine, maybe not so much in your rig, Alex, but if you have a good wheel like mine, you feel the weight in your hands. And so when I do the sim racing and you take that out onto karting, you feel the difference and you feel, go, right, it's about weight transfer, and you feel the strength in your hands. And when it goes light, it's understeer. When it goes heavy, it's all about the rear, all those kind of things. So we joke about, we do iRacing, so we understand a little bit. But I do know what it's like to try and take those corners in Kota, those final corners, I think.
Yeah, it's all we've got. And iRacing is highly... I mean, let's put it this way. The current 3-time F1 world champion spends more time on iRacing
he's on it constantly,
than he does in a Formula One car.
Oh, by the way,
that says it, and competitively, and is one of the best in the world at that as well.
If you think that Verstappen is dirty on track in F1, but I'm not saying it, I'm just saying if you think that, he's proper mucky online. No, when he wants to be. So most of the time he's clean.
I've seen revenge attacks.
Exactly. If someone annoys him, he just goes, no. And there was one time at Spa, and it was a proper official top tier race where everyone's like really invested in it. There's broadcasters.
It was an endurance.
There's commentators and everything. And at the end of the Kemmel Straight, someone had annoyed him. So he just beelined, didn't take a com, and went straight over to make sure he could wipe someone out. And on the stream, he just goes, yeah, they deserved that. So that's why I did that.
If you don't leave the space, that's what you get.
something. But I will say, his streams, you see a really nice side of Max. I like Max on his streams.
I like sim racing, Max. Sim racing stepdad Max is nice and funny.
I have forgotten the question. Right, they are going to not win another race. So yes, so Mercedes have taken themselves out of that equation. Ferrari seem to have done the opposite. I'm so angry at Ferrari because Matt told me last week on the race review, Matt revealed to me that there was no upgrade for Austin. So they've just been that good the entire time.
I was stunned when I was listening to that. I listened to you lot in the gym on Monday, and I was like, I had to stop what I was doing when Matt said, yeah, Ferrari didn't have an upgrade. I'm like,
I was floored.
What?
I was absolutely floored.
So they've just been that good.
Yeah. Which I'm angry at you. Like, don't celebrate. How dare you celebrate that win when you could have been that good the whole time?
But this is the whole thing with Ferrari, and this is the only thing that has me worried for Lewis being there. Is I just worry Lewis will get. I mean, he can't get more frustrated than he currently is with Mercedes, but I mean, because Mercedes have done a wonderful job of Ferrariing this season. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. And yeah, listen, if there is actually a shout, it's a stretch, and I know this is a stretch, but there is a shout that Leclerc could win this title still. It's there. It's mathematical. It's more crazy than saying Lando can win this championship.
Oh, so I have to. This is where I need a mental note, and this is why, kids, you always have a notepad. So the next thing I want to talk about is, what we're talking about is Red Bull not winning, and so I want to talk about why McLaren might also be struggling at the moment, because we had that thread. But since you've said this, Scott says, I reckon Charles Leclerc is favourite for the 2025 World Championship.
Favourite is a stretch.
It's a stretch, yeah. But Chris says...
Oh, sorry, did you say 25?
25, yeah. But Chris G says, I reckon Charles will pip Lando to second place in the Drivers' Championship. So I tweeted, I did the maths. You know how I love my championship running maths. So I do it like mid-season. I'm like, Yuki Tsunoda is technically, he can't be champion now. But Charles Leclerc needs to outscore Verstappen, I think, by 16.8 points per event. So that includes the sprint. Per event, per weekend, he needs to outscore him by 16.8, and they will be level. And the only way he can really do that is by winning all the races. So therefore, on countback, he will be the winner. So it's a stretch, but he's technically in it. And I think it's the same percentage of points that Raikkonen was behind at this point in 2007. It isn't impossible that Leclerc could win the championship. So look at this triple header, couple of DNFs from Verstappen with Leclerc winning. It's not implausible. It's happened before. Doesn't Verstappen still have engine penalties to take as well?
That's what I was just about to say. I think Max at least has one engine penalty to take. I think the way Red Bull would do it would be to do as little as possible, unlike if it was later, unless if it was further away, they'd have just started him at the back. It will be probably 10 places. So
right, just take the ICU.
It will be less of a damage. Now. If they can get away, I have no idea what their parts are at the moment.
So I think the ICU is the... I'm guessing a little bit. I did see a graph. I think the ICU
the
is
ICE is the
ICE. So that's 10 if you change the internal combustion engine, that's 10 places, and then there's 2 other bits of gubbins where it's another 5. Thing.
This is where Matt's useful.
Yeah, I know. But basically, I think the highest risk is the 10 place. I think they're going to have to take one 10 place penalty at some point. It looks like, or risk an engine blowout and a DNF.
If Ferrari can continue their form from last weekend, and McLaren don't mess up setting the car up, there is every possibility that Max finishes 5th in every single race.
Ooh, yeah.
But it's then between the 4 ahead of him on how many points they steal from each other.
I know.
And that's been the big problem.
Ferrari...
Is because Ferrari, McLaren and Mercedes have all been so close up until this point, they've all been stealing points off of each other. Lewis won 2 races, George won a race, Sainz won a race, Leclerc's won 2, and then McLaren inexplicably gave Piastri a win, despite the fact he deserved it. Is irrelevant. You're in a championship fight. And there was the possibility, but it's look after your teammate. Yeah, he did loads when he looked after your Monza, didn't he? McLaren have made an absolute pig's ear of this because I think they've been shoved into a world championship fight that they weren't prepared to be in and have completely and utterly fumbled it.
They started the season saying, man, we think we're going to smash it. We're going to do everything it takes. We're going to do really well this season, and P2 is ours for the taking. And that was their attitude going in.
Yep.
So
they had no intention of winning either championship, let alone both of them.
So I don't care about the constructors. I know people don't like that. But also, can I just... Because when I talked about the bib stuff and the potential bib cheat, if you like, and also when I've talked about anything that Red Bull might have done right, people go, oh, yeah? Well, you were fine with McLaren's dodgy rear wing. I'm not. Like, I did say it here, didn't I? When all that was coming out, I said, I think that from what I've seen, it looks like they've got a cheaty, slightly openy mini DRS.
And it's disappeared.
And so the initial thing was, we don't care because we're only doing it on chat room. Please correct me if I'm wrong here. initially they only were doing it on the lower downforce spec wing. But I believe that not only have McLaren had to change it on and now on all the wings, but also they're not the only team that has had to change it on all the wings. So I think there is a possibility that the fact that they are now behind Ferrari, because it definitely looks like they're behind Ferrari, is down to the wing. So that wing might have had an effect. And so
but they didn't have that wing at Singapore, and they annihilated everybody at Singapore. The problem is you can't judge it race to race. You have to judge it over a period. Over a period.
At Singapore, the newsfeed was saying they only had to change the low spec wing, and then coming into Austin, the story was they've had to change all of them. So there might have been there might have been a period at Singapore where they're like, of course, well, I understand what you're saying. We'll change the low spec wing. You're absolutely right, and we'll do that. And then they got away with it at Singapore, and then since Singapore, the news has come out that they've had to change it on all the wings. And if you look at how far they are behind Ferrari on what is a fairly standard track, like a good proper Grand Prix track, you go, whoa, maybe they
Especially
did.
when Ferrari had no updates.
Ferrari had no updates. I can't.
I know how much that hurts you. As a diehard Ferrari fan, I know how much that hurts you.
I think from now on, you have to whisper it when you go, just remember, Ferrari had no updates. And then they went around. So it feels to me, and this is my instinct, at the beginning of the weekend, everyone was like, oh yeah, you said Red Bull weren't going to do good upgrades. And then they looked great in the sprint, in the same way they looked great in the sprint at Austria as well. I do feel like it's the time of day that it happens that might have some kind of factor. But by the end of the weekend, it was clear, as you pointed out, Alex, as well, that Red Bull was struggling on pure race pace. They didn't have the rears. They seemed to be losing the rears. I think it was the same in the Austrian Grand Prix as well. It was on the exits of the slow corners that they were struggling and seemed to be losing rear grip. And in the sprint, McLaren knew this. They kept saying, we're looking out for the rears going. We're looking out for the rears going. And it didn't really happen in the sprint, but it did happen.
And then his fronts went.
But it did happen in the but it did happen in the main race. And I think you'd expect the fronts to go, wouldn't you, in Austin? Through the S's.
Sorry, I got distracted by the chat. Say that again.
Come on, chat. What are you doing?
Actually, I got tagged. Paolo said they seem to have undeclared upgrades.
I don't know. Maybe that's a way of covering it up. Where if they had no upgrades and then they suddenly not only won but were dominant. Can we be clear on that? The Ferrari was dominant at Austin.
Leclerc was comfortable up front, and Sainz came through the pack.
And then they go, right, well, how did you do it? They say you've had no upgrade. How did you do it? And they stare into the camera and go, we had upgrades because the alternative is we've been terrible for many, many races. So
and listen, the thing with F1 all the way through the years, everyone is cheating all of the time. It's who gets caught. And the ones who don't get caught cheating are doing cheating really, really well. And everyone is pushing that envelope. That is what Formula One is. There will be something on every single car that probably isn't to the regulations, but they've not been caught.
So I think there's a difference. So for the McLaren one, they would argue, well, we passed the tests. And in our mind, passing the test was the main thing. So we passed the test, but we found a way around it. And
I like your passing the test argument.
But then the FIA have gone, well, you did pass the test and well done. But we have a set of regulations here that say you're not meant to do this thing, and you are doing the thing even though you passed the test. So the test isn't the be-all and end-all, and I think it's pretty clear to me that they haven't disqualified any of the previous results of McLaren. Therefore, they've basically gone, you nearly got, well done, you got us, you got away with it, don't do it anymore. To me, that's what's happened. And they haven't told us, because the FIA have a history of not telling us when they do these things necessarily. So the test wasn't the be all and end all in the end, and they can't. But passing the test makes it a loophole. So they found a loophole. The loophole has been closed, and I think to me, looking at the relative paces of where they are behind the no upgrades Ferrari, McLaren have been nerfed a little. And did Red Bull fix the car? Because we're still talking about Patrick's question here, 52 minutes in, question 2. You panicked, Alex, in sprint quali, and you were like, "Oh, it's all over. Red Bull have fixed the car. It's all over. Oh my God, everything's terrible." I don't think Red Bull have fixed the car. There you go.
I think they fixed it to an extent where Max is more comfortable. And I think Max being more comfortable means he can still be in and around the faster cars to make himself a nuisance and punt Lando off.
Yeah. Well, now there's another factor to that, which is that Red Bull and Max Verstappen are by far the better organization on a Saturday. They're so good at making the right decisions. And like, how much in our WhatsApp group do we like swear at Mercedes constantly for every single decision they make?
Honestly, I think I sent, but when we were preparing for the show, I sent my reckon was, what the WTF is going on with Mercedes? Where is the 8-time world championship Mercedes who didn't make mistakes? Where they gone?
I think maybe it was masked by having such an advantage or having that engine advantage, but I don't know. But now every qualifying, it seems they put them out in really high stakes positions, and you go, why have you put them under that much pressure? But the point is that Verstappen isn't making mistakes on Saturday on qualifying. He's not. And Red Bull aren't making any mistakes. And in an era now where qualifying is important, track position is important, that the pack is so close, Verstappen is able to maximize, even if he has like a P7 car, if he can stick it on P3 by having a better Saturday, he's going to be there. He's not going to get caught up in the things that P5 is getting caught up in. And that's probably, in the end, why he's got this title sewn up.
Max has Max has turned the volume down on people who have said he's a car merchant this season.
Oh, no.
I think he's gone from having the best car and doing the job in the best car, which is, you've still got to do the job when you've got the best car. And then when he's not got the best car, he's still doing the job. He is getting the maximum out of his car every single weekend. He's not making mistakes. He's not going.
And others aren't.
He's not going long in his pit box. He's not messing up qualifying. He's not having spins. He's just doing the job and getting the absolute maximum out of that car when other people wouldn't do and other people aren't doing. And that's why I think he's still going to win this championship, because the others are fighting with each other.
And on the converse, maybe Norris isn't doing that. So I think this might be the last things I reckon. Joey Forbes says, I reckon that if Norris doesn't win the World Drivers' Championship this year, he won't get another shot. Assuming McLaren starts out with a good car in 2025, Oscar might get that P1. So I think I'm going to use this as an excuse to talk about sort of Norris in general and our evolution about thinking about Norris. So Liam Banks also says, I reckon if Verstappen was in the McLaren and Norris in the Red Bull, then Verstappen would still be leading the championship. So I'm actually going to start with the Liam one. I reckon if Verstappen was in the McLaren and Norris was in the Red Bull, then Verstappen would be leading the championship. I agree. And I agree in the same way that I agreed with 2018. I think 2018, you put Hamilton in the Ferrari wins, and you put Vettel in the Mercedes, and his mistakes cost them. I think I agree with this. Maybe you'd have to move some strategists over as well, because there's been some mistakes from the McLaren pit wall. But I genuinely think that Verstappen has done better than Norris, and I've tried so hard to get on the Norris train, and we've argued about this endlessly, but I don't think that Norris has anything like the CV of Max Verstappen. So why would we think that in a straight fight, Norris would beat Verstappen?
So I'm a Norris fan, have been since he joined the sport.
Yeah, I know.
You know, I had my hashtag Love Lando, which I had when I started. However, I also don't think he's the same Lando Norris that joined the sport 4 or 5 years ago, whenever it was.
Explain why.
The media ruined him.
That's true.
It was Lando, come play with us, come do this fun thing. And then he's like, actually, no, I need to get serious now.
But they didn't ruin him as like his pace. They didn't ruin him with his tactics or his racing skill. They ruined him by going, oh, you're quite good at like improv and have obviously watched SNL a bunch. We want to do that with you as well. Oh, it's so horrible, it's so cringy.
So the thing about, if we go to the pace of the cars, the thing I think we've forgotten, the McLaren wasn't very good at the beginning of the season. It was
True.
Well, it was well behind the Merc. So where I disagree he would be ahead now, the gap would be really close and Max would be winning the rest of the races and qualifying on pole for the rest of the races for the rest of the season, almost with no drama. That's how, if the car's as good, that's how good we think the car is. And in that case, Lando also owes Lewis a hell of an apology.
Explain that.
So throughout Lewis's dominant phase, Lando would take digs at
Constant digs
at Lewis having the best car. And, anyone can do it in that car. He had a dig at Lewis this year when Lewis wasn't having a dig at him. Lewis was just telling him his car was really fast. And Lando snapped at him and said, oh, you had a car for 7 years. Yeah, but Lewis went and won the titles with that fast car. Lando is finding out something that I have said for a really long time, which is you can have the best car in the sport, but if you can't actually maximize it and get that final percentage out of the car, it's going to look normal. And that's the kind of ability that a Max has, that a Lewis has, that an Alonso used to have. And
you can't say that out loud. How dare you?
I can, and I'd say it to his face.
Alex
his
Van Gien,
smug face.
Tweet it, tag him. Honestly, he'll respond. He responded to Summers.
He did respond to Summers. I have tagged him before. He's never responded to me. I haven't got enough followers. Summers has got lots of followers, and he likes that kind of attention. But if you do want to, follow me on Twitter at Alex Van Gien on Twitter, and then I get more followers, and then I will go on an Alonso
I wouldn't recommend
tirade.
it. I wouldn't recommend it.
No, I've had a lot of Alonso fans hate on me on Twitter as it is.
Yeah, well, me.
They're worse than the Max. No, they're worse than the Max fans.
And you constantly have a go at me for being an Alonso fan.
You don't make any sense. Your fandom makes no sense.
Why? I like Fernando Alonso.
I understand why you like Lewis, because he's a Brit. I understand.
#44, let's go.
Exactly.
Let's go.
And Forza Ferrari. I understand why you like Ferrari.
Yeah, love Ferrari.
Now at least.
And Yuki, go Yuki.
But you like Perez, but you don't like pay drivers.
He's
and
not a
people
pay
with
driver.
privilege. He is the most privileged driver on the grid. What I loved is you talk about Lando being a pay driver when we found out the other day that you thought that Lando's dad was worth billions.
Yeah, I'm wrong.
He's worth 200 million quid.
No, I actually repeated that claim in quite a high, to my mind, a high-powered gathering, and everyone was like, "Are you sure?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm absolutely sure." And I've had to DM people going, "Oh, that random conversation where I said that Norris was a billionaire's kid. Sorry, completely wrong."
I think George Russell's dad's got more money.
Is it? No
yeah,
way.
I think so. I was trying to do some digging, but I couldn't find it. But I think George Russell's dad's got quite a lot. Anyway,
no, but I demonstrated Perez. Look, chat. Remind
you didn't
Alex,
do a good job.
Remind
you
Alex
tried.
when I won the argument that Perez wasn't a pay driver by my specific definition that backs up my
in
case.
your little box. Yeah. But if I tried to get out your box, you'd come up with some fallacy to mean I'm wrong. Spanners is trying to teach me to argue.
I'm teaching
better.
him to debate. I'm actually teaching Alex to beat Brad Philpott in debates by teaching him logical fallacies and debating skills. Like, Alex, what you don't have to be right to win an argument. You've just got to understand debating.
I know. I'm in arguments with you a lot. You're mostly wrong, but you're better at arguing.
Okay, well, what's wrong
with
this? What's wrong with my Alonso fandom?
Hence this. You like nice people.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
He's proved it time and time again that he is not a nice person. And he gaslights. He is more of a gaslighter than Christian Horner is.
So when you watch those romance movies and you're like, why would you ever be with that guy? Like, it's obvious. Look at the nerd with a golden heart. But then they end up going with the Alonso. I think I get it now. I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I dropped a bombshell. Nobody knew I had those feelings about Alonso. Oh, no, hang on. No, everyone knew I had those feelings about Alonso.
I am so lost on what we're talking about. So the last
Lando Norris.
Yeah. So the last reckon was from Liam Banks. I reckon if Verstappen was in the McLaren, and Norris was in the Red Bull, then Verstappen would be leading the championship. So I have a little bit of support for Liam. So I have a few cases here. So Austria and Kota. So Austria and Kota, no way Verstappen would have lost those battles. So wheel-to-wheel battles, and we can argue about the method, because I don't like Verstappen's method. I think it actually was outside of the rules, and I think that the stewards stewarded that incorrectly, even by the rules. And goodness knows people are willing to argue with me about that. I have a lot of proof on my Twitter feed, but that's what I think. But it was always going to be Verstappen, and he has cultivated that in the sport. So that's part of it. In Austria, Verstappen finished P5 despite basically ending Norris's race. Right? He got a penalty, but it was an inconsequential penalty. Who cares? But he ended up in P5, got points. Norris didn't get points in Austria. And that would not have happened the other way round. Agree? So that's 2. We've got 2 at least, haven't we?
Yeah, okay.
And I've got some more.
I'll give you that.
I've got more things. Lando Norris, how many lap 1 disasters has he had? So all of them. How many poles has he lost? All of them?
He only hasn't lost 1 on the first lap.
And then ended up losing that later or not?
No, he won that race.
Okay.
Singapore.
But he got through turn 1 in Monza and lost to his own teammate. That would never have happened.
Any other team. I'm bearing in mind the move from Oscar was fabulous.
Yeah, it was fine. It was fine.
But Max would have run him off the circuit.
But hang on, there's another thing. There's another factor.
Legally, within the rules.
Legally, Verstappen would never have had himself in the position where his teammate had a contract where he could do that to him. That Max would have gamed that, and that's part of F1, isn't it? That's part of F1. So if you
part of F1. Do you think Perez has a you can't go anywhere near Max contract?
Yeah.
Now, do you think he originally had it before he got absolutely pasted multiple seasons in a row?
I don't know. That's a good point. I think now...
Is it a case of, right, you can have your contract, but you are number 2?
Okay, I think Verstappen... Oh, God. Right, we're going to have an argument now. Because I forgot it was you. Gosh, damn it. So I pretty much I dine out on Perez doesn't have the same car. And you're like, blah, blah, blah. I've got proof. I've got schematics. Oh, I'm best friends with Christian Horner or whatever. And you're like, you think they definitely have the same car. I don't think they do. And I think that if Verstappen goes to McLaren, I think that situation would continue at McLaren.
The only reason I don't massively subscribe to doesn't have the same car, he might be an upgrade package behind if Red Bull operate like that.
So you admit
we all
it.
knew.
Oh,
we all
okay,
knew
good.
what happened.
I finally win the argument. Thank goodness.
No,
for that.
hang on. We all know that back in the day there was the whole Webber, Vettel. Not too bad for a number 2 driver because they didn't have front wings. And then after that point, they said, we just won't do anything if we don't have the parts for both drivers. But I think it's so wild to have a wildly different car. Funnily enough, there was an interview with Alex Albon where he talked about how Max likes to drive the car, which is where lots of F1 drivers like the car on the nose and like it pointy, but Max likes it so pointy that it makes it impossible. Therefore, it becomes, if it's not how you like it, the car is so on edge, and then your confidence is hit, and then you just can't drive the car properly. And then you get closer and closer and closer, and then you make a mistake and you're in the wall, and you go all the way back again. I think there is a lot of that involved in it, rather than the cars are just wildly different.
All right. I think they're different. So
define different.
I just think it's a different car. I honestly think that the gap...
Is it a V-carb?
I think the gap between Verstappen and Perez isn't representative of their skill. And if you put them in identical cars, I think the gap would be closer. I'm not claiming Perez would beat Verstappen, but I am waiting for the autobiography of Perez. And I think it's called I Shouldn't Have Gone on That Yacht. I Was Really Happy. Sorry. Okay, so why don't we do... I think all this came from, Norris. So there's been a lot of lap 1 mistakes. And they count against Norris. The inter-team interaction, the politics in the team, overall it's 57 points, I actually do think that it would be a hell of a lot closer if they swapped cars.
That's what I mean. I whether he would already be ahead, I don't know, because Red Bull had such a good start versus McLaren having a sub-optimal start. So whether he'd be ahead or not, I think it's more a case of it would have been like towards the end of 2021 when Lewis went on that run of winning all those races, and but with cars in between. So I don't disagree with you, but and I agree with the commenter, just not quite yet.
All right, we were meant to do a Mexico preview here, and that's gone by the. Okay.
I'm not going to get to bloody watch the race anyway because I'm be racing.
Okay, let's play James's voice note.
I reckon that Mercedes might actually have the worst driver lineup next year, with the only real competition I see being Alpine.
Oh, come on. Leave.
Oh, my days.
My good, that's horrible. Okay, we're going to go a bit more quick fire on that. So, shade thrown at Mercedes driver lineup and Alpines. You go.
God. So, is Zhou still in the sport?
Oh, it's not decided, is it? Is it? No, it is.
Is Zhou still in the sport?
No.
I don't know.
It's
Bottas is moving, isn't he?
It's the Doohan, Jack Doohan in Austin, in Alpine.
That's not Alpine. That's the green car.
Jack Doohan is driving for Alpine next season alongside Gasly. Yes.
Yeah, okay. Fine. I've got to be honest, I have fallen out because to give you dear listeners, a view into the Missed Apex WhatsApp chat where news flies around. Mostly Spanners and Brad arguing, and I'll often whether it's heated or not, it's you two generally going back and forth, and I'll look at my phone and it says 98 messages. I'm not reading them. I'm also not one for news, so I don't read a lot of news. And I get my news feed from this lot. And eventually when I see something new, I put it in the chat and they told me it happened 4 days ago. So I don't bother.
Can I just clarify that me and Brad will argue ferociously, but by the time we get to an argument, one of us tends to kind of go, oh, right, yeah, fair enough. You're
Sometimes.
Right. It happened. Like
other stuff happens, but also sure.
Apart from
and then what happens is the conversation dies down.
Yeah.
And then Matt reads the conversation. Matt gets involved, and then it starts again.
Yeah. Mostly, like the vegan one is the only one that we can't fully agree on. But do continue.
The weakest. God, I don't know because we don't know how good Kimi Antonelli is because 4 laps into his only P1, he binned it in the wall. But there are lots of really glowing things coming from him, and Toto obviously believes he's special. I rate George Russell. I think he's been distracted by having Lewis Hamilton as a teammate because I want to beat Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah,
I think has basically just been in his head, and I think
I need to be ahead
him
at all costs, even if it makes us both go down the grid.
Absolutely. And it has been to his detriment because he's like, yay, I'm ahead of Lewis. Oh, crud, I've got no tyres left. And he's done it time and time and time again. He's fast, undeniably fast. You can't say he's not because he's, over the course of 3 seasons, he's out-qualified Lewis Hamilton, the statistically greatest qualifier of all time, more times. He beat him.
Rosberg did it as well in 2015. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. So, but Rosberg is the greatest P2 driver, the greatest one-time world champion ever. So,
that's according to Catman. I did not endorse that opinion from Catman.
I like the argument. Though. Go back and listen to that episode.
Yeah. I don't know what we called it. What did we call it? Is Rosberg the underrated?
The greatest, greatest number 2 driver of all time.
The title was Rosberg underrated? That's the argument we had there.
So yeah, I think George has the possibility to. Now he'll be out of the shadow of Lewis, and as long as he's got a bit of an arm's length from Kimi, and Kimi has a good run, I think they'll be solid. So I don't think they'll be the worst pairing on the grid.
I think it's possible. Because, okay, so if you're doing a really optimistic thing, if George Russell sorts out the issues he's had this year with just in my mind, like an excited
His
puppy.
issue is his head, though.
Yeah,
It's
I think
not
it's
his
in the head.
ability.
It's in the head. I must qualify up the grid at all costs, whether or not that compromises my race pace. I must use up my tyres and overtake people now and go and attack now and do this thing now. And and then, have, bully the PR person into saying that I'm the tyre whisperer. Because that happened. That happened. He's like, I've got those pictures from the Christmas party, Derek and PR. You'd better say I'm the tyre whisperer now. So if he doesn't sort those issues out, if they are a core part of what he's doing,
They could crumble.
They could crumble. And Antonelli, he might be the second coming of Schumacher. He might be Mansell incarnate if he grows a moustache.
Can we answer this question halfway through next season?
No, we have to do it now. We have to wildly speculate. And then if we're wrong, we just delete this episode. I've done it before and I'll do it again.
I still like Mercedes, despite the fact they are infuriating me at the moment. I still like Toto and I still like Mercedes. And I will give them the benefit of the doubt.
They could be wrong about Antonelli. So there's a lot of doubt. There is a possibility if Antonelli is overrated and Russell continues how he has been for the last 3 seasons, they may well have the weakest driver pairing in the top 5. I think that's.
Oh,
real.
I think they have in the top 5. They have the weakest driver pairing.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
So that's. I don't think that's within question, because
you're assuming Lawson's going to Red Bull.
No, I just think Max on his own is pretty better. But yeah, so Ferrari, I think. Well, Ferrari, as far as I'm concerned, will have the best driver pairing on the grid.
Hands down.
Unless you're James Vowles and you think it's Williams.
We're not good at quick fire, are we?
Then I think McLaren, then Red Bull. Yeah.
All right.
It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I want to get through some of these. So let's actually be quick fire.
Okay, we'll do quick fire. I promise we'll do quick fire.
So let's see. Mehmet. That's a Turkish name. Mehmet. Since this. Oh my goodness. Okay.
Hey, Sparrows and Mr. Apex.
Hey, Mehmet.
I'll get straight to the point. So I reckon that F1 drivers should be allowed to be heavier. We have tall drivers in the sport. Anyway, allow them to put on some muscle mass. Let them eat more. They're not going anywhere anyway. They're in our sport, short and tall drivers. Their tallness has not been an issue as it stands. Just let them have more muscles. It will be easier on them. I see no real downsides to it anyway. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
You know how I feel about this, Alex. You're gonna get your say, but shut up for a second. No. If I want to play basketball, does someone give me a step ladder? When I shoot, do they lower the basketball hoop? No. So, no. In motorsport, being smaller, being lighter is an advantage. Don't you? Tall people. They're not satisfied enough to have statistically more CEOs in their demographic, or just be generally respected, or not have to deal with the systematic mocking of people who happen to not have long bones. No, you need to go into motorsport as well. Leave us alone. Go play basketball. That's my say.
Oh dear. If anything, you're consistent. So I'll let you have
motorsport is all about weight, and that includes humans. Sorry, massive humans. Go and enjoy the other huge privileges of having long skeletons.
The only problem with your argument is I'm only 2 inches taller than you, but I'm way heavier than you, despite how hard I'm trying. And that's also the issue. I just think it's that case of, it comes down to a health point of view. You had so many of them almost wanting to pass out at one of the Grand Prix last year. I forget which one it was, one of the hot ones. And I think if you allow them to be a little bit bigger, I mean, Lewis Hamilton has said this before, where he
can't gain muscle.
He wants to put on more muscle, but he physically can't. You have all the talk of marginal gains from Nico Rosberg of stopping cycling and whatever, whether you believe that.
Oh, I'd never get in an F1 car with these thighs, with these quads from heaven. No.
But marginal gains is a thing where you do a whole bunch of little things and it adds up to a big thing. And I mean, I won't go into details. Me and Brad have managed to do that in the car and whatever. So I do believe they should be a little bit heavier. But however, that does not mean increasing the weight of the cars. because our cars are big and fat and they need to be much, much lighter. So I would happily knock 10 kilos off the car and let the drivers have 10 more kilos to play with, because then we just have bigger, healthier drivers. I'm not saying it will obviously benefit your Nico Hulkenbergs of the world. Who else is tall?
Oh,
George
yeah,
Russell's
Nico
tall, isn't he?
Hulkenberg. Oh, he's not got any advantages in life with that jawline and that
But he's
hair.
never had a podium.
Oh, I look like a Disney prince and my life is perfect. Please give me more advantages. My God, in horse racing, what are we going to do? Are we going to strap ballast to horses so that you can have massive jockeys? No.
Funnily enough, Felipe Massa was strongly in this camp of no, do not increase the drive away. I am tiny. I don't weigh anything. That's my advantage. Go away.
Okay, can I use Brad's thing where we were going to weight up in our Missed Apex events and say, right, if you want to win the
He
real
really doesn't
thing,
like it.
you should weight up to a certain thing. And I will defend Brad on this. He says, no, I starve myself. I have a fitness routine. Not anymore. I know.
No, he doesn't.
This
I'm
was
sorry.
This was 10
does.
years ago.
He eats pizza at least 4 times a week.
But his defense
I have
was-
spent so much time with Brad over this course of this year. Brad doesn't. I eat better than Brad does. I eat way healthier and way less than Brad does, and he's still a pencil.
And Brad is on the call right now. He's joining the call right now. No, but Brad says, you know, I put a lot of effort, and I believe him. I put a lot of effort into being the correct weight for my sport, and in the same way you would do with boxing, that is part of motorsport, and tall people can just do one. Like, oh, sorry,
Genetics, cough,
Yeah.
genetics.
Yeah.
No, other way around. Cough, genetics, cough.
And that does give a massive disadvantage to basically everyone in Scandinavia. But have you seen their towns and cities? They're happy. Just leave them to it. They're fine. Like, go to Copenhagen. Everything is how you assume stuff should be. All right.
We failed at quickfire.
We have failed at quickfire. Okay, quickfire then. This is just to you, Alex. Okay. In one sentence, John M says, I reckon this is the best F1 season in at least a decade. 5 races to go. There's still a lot in the air. 7 different winners, 4 different teams. Go.
Second, because 2021 was better, but it's really close.
Oh, now I want to dwell on that. No, I'm not going to. Chris says, I reckon this is the best era of racing in decades.
Define the era.
10 years.
Yeah.
Oh, that was easy.
Yeah,
Mark.
I'll agree with that. It's the cars work well. The teams are really close. The drivers are really close. It's more popular than it's ever been. Yes, it's the best era. It's the best
Mark,
era for
who's northern and grumpy, says, I reckon we've been robbed of the best era of racing in decades by the inconsistent application of already terrible racing rules.
Not talking about the incident.
That's true. Yeah, we can't do that.
It's the only blemish on it, and it's made me consider the sport. I watched Moto GP at the weekend.
Oh my
That's
God.
how much the incident made me get annoyed at Formula One, because
All the best clips from MotoGP are them falling off. They can't even stay on the bikes.
They just need the stewards to be the same.
Well,
They need to employ professional
Nasta,
stewards.
Ben Nasta says, don't interrupt the segue, Mr. Van Gene. Ben Nasta says, I reckon it's time for one set of professional stewards who are every race and do their job full time.
Absolutely. Professional stewards who understand the rules, who are media facing as well, you know, can explain things and talk about them. Also, the sport needs to do a better job at explaining the rules, because they're a hodgepodge mess. I mean, I disagree with all of them, but I'm not going to go into that one now. But
We did a good job of avoiding the thing. I think we did quite well. Stuart says, I reckon Missed Apex will have more than 10 million downloads before the end of the season. And that might be true. I'm really excited about this, Alex. We are on 9,600,000 and something downloads, and we tend to get at the moment around 210,000 downloads a month. So there's a good chance that basically by December we'll have hit 10 million downloads. And I know it's an arbitrary number, but 10 million is a pretty big number.
do you remember sometimes it's just me and you talking on a computer with our mates, and then realise there's that many people watching, and then nerves come back. It's like when we did that live show.
Oh my God, these people are real.
I was sat there, and bearing in mind, I was sat in the middle table. So then you were like on a chair over there, and Antonio, whatever, was on a chair over there, and I'm just sat staring at 40 people. and having to entertain, be informative, attempt to be funny. And
no, it didn't really go.
It was. I'm not ashamed to admit.
Yeah, and like Miami, we probably had about like 75 heads there in Miami, in a whole another country. And I'm really, really looking at ways that we can do it. Well, I know we couldn't do Kota; it didn't make financial sense. But we are talking to someone who can put us in front of decision makers to get funding for those kind of live events in America at the moment. So there's positivity in that way. But also, like I try to downplay it to the panel, but every now and then I let myself down by comparing our audience to a UK Premier League ground. And at the moment, so after the summer break, we had an episode, I forget which one, where we could have filled Villa Park. So Villa Park is, Aston Villa in Birmingham, which is a Premier League team. And we had one episode where if you counted up the YouTube and the downloads, it was something like 43,000 or something, and you go, whew, try not to think about 43,000 people listening to my opinion about whatever. And no wonder some people yell at me, which I don't mind. But 10 million, we can make it, and I think we should do something in person, live, to celebrate that. So maybe we'll look at a season review, or maybe something like leading up to Abu Dhabi, something like that in the UK.
Podcast.
Right.
How many times do I have to say it? Bearing in mind the last time I said it, the chat went mental.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. So everyone, you want to hear a drunk version of our already barely competent show, but we can do it. We can do a live show in a pub. We don't have to. Why do you have to call it Drunkcast? Let's have a social beer and record some stuff before Abu Dhabi. How about that?
Well, Brad drinks whiskey now.
He's a whiskey drinker. That's true. And I don't mind that. A single malt, a Talisker, a Lefroy. Let's get that on. Okay, so we'll think about those things. But thank you to everybody who has shared anything of Missed Apex podcast, because we don't have the funding or the advertising budget of the big people, of the people who just throw money at it or get corporate investment. We rely on word of mouth. So even if you have like 10 Twitter followers, 100 Facebook friends, if you share that link and one person clicks it and checks us out, then if 100 people do that and 5 people like it, that's how we've been doing things for 10 years. It's all about word of mouth and you guys saying, hey, I enjoy listening to these guys put F1 context in context for me, or I have opinions that I disagree with them about, or they simply are like a parasocial relationship where I feel like I'm listening to a bunch of my friends talking. So please do share the links, Spotify links or iTunes links, and help us get to 10 million. Doesn't feel real, does it, Alex? 10 million.
It's a mental, crazy number, and it's really funny when I've spoken to like people at work that I do an F1 podcast, and they're like, oh, whatever. So, yeah, it gets 52,000 downloads an episode, and they go, oh. And then I remember when we hit 2 million. And I told, and then like, oh, and it's like, yeah. Apart from the massive shows with huge budgets run by corporations, we're the biggest F1 show.
But the way we've done it and the way that it's always grown is we've barely changed throughout the 10 years. It's always been about engagement in the community. Our patron community is absolutely fantastic. We love having the live stream, so it always feels like the Patreon live stream is with us when we do it. So come and join our community. Come and support us. Patreon.com/MissedApex. Tell us about the show. Go and follow Alex Van Gene on Twitter. He is at... No? What do you want to...
at Alex Van Gene on Twitter. At Alex Van Gene Racing on YouTube. That's the thing I'm trying to grow at the moment. I had my last race review out a couple of weeks ago. And then there'll be another one out, as long as everything works with the racing this weekend, on next week. And I've got a new toy to play with because I got sent a camera that's going to go inside my helmet that's actually properly designed to be there. So I'm excited to use that.
Nice one. Share those links with me.
Thank you, Cambox.
Share those links with me, Alex, and I'll make sure they go in the show notes for this episode. Follow me at Spanners Ready or Richard Ready on your social media platform of choice. We will see you late at night. We're going to stream again at around 12:30. Me, Matt, and Christina to review the Mexican Grand Prix. Until we see you next, work hard, be kind, and have fun. This was Missed Apex Podcast. A drunk cast would just be awful. It would be us, like, all the things we get criticised for times 10.
Yeah. What's your problem?
Oh, yeah, to be fair. Yeah.
We put disclaimers. It's fine. And it'll have a big R next to it because we're not going to not swear on that show. So, yeah.
I don't trust Alex. Let's do a drunk cast, but Alex can't be on it. That's the conclusion. There we go.
I'll get the drinks.